Cho sampo pa gyu tra shi pa tu che tempe trin le yar ngo da Elge trolor zampe ze parace Palde lame shabla solvade Omo a guru vajradara sumati munisha sanekar Uta vardani shri bara varsa manya sarva siddhi hum Om a guru vajradara sumati munisha sanekar Uta vardani shri bara varsa manya sarva siddhi hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Vardanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Utta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajra Dara Suma Timo Nisha Sane Karma Utta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om A Guru Vajra Suma Timo Nisha Sane Karma Utta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Dhagi Jetsun Lama Tuje Che Nyamda Dala Tuje Siksu So Gebe Shesan Dala Tendo So Oyon Sunge Nawa Tsedo So Tseche Nine Solwa Debe Tse Dechen Korlo Visu Lekshu Ne Yila Sambe Dede Malupa Geme Lunge Drubra Jinge Lo Tsoni Sodan Dikdun Shape Tse Dunge namke yin so lekshu ne labchen tsonye yonso tsopa dang chera nye dun chamra jinge loba chancho parge nyinsen tukun tu niyo peme siudru lekshu ne chancho drube geken kunshi shi Dunge dela drubra jinge loba dage lona chola chokpa chomi samchur ngemba shiwa dan chodan tumbe dudun malupa Beme lunge drubra jinge loba dorna tingne tseraba tamche dang techi pardo nekab tamche tu rese kyamne lama keleme tukje chinge dala siksu sola komkyab drewe nyamta dachala jetsun lame tuje rab gongne kudan sunge nawa dralme tu nyamsu nyongwe kesan topra shu kewa kundu yanda lama dang Rame cheki pela longche chin sadan lamge yende rab dorje change kopa nyor tobe shun pakyuke kudan dage lu pakyuke sundan dage nga pakyuke tudan dage ye tun yerme chik tu chingi lo ma kyo ke kudan da gi lo ma kyo ke sundan da gi ma kyo ke tudan da gi ten yer me chik tu chingi Shakyamuni Swaha Sashipeke Choshimeto Ramare Ravalingashin Nidegem Padi Sange Shintu Mikte Ulwarki Drokunanam Dashin Chopar Shoye Damanguru lam niryatayami. Sangye chedan tsogi chonam la chancho pardo dani kyapsu chi dagi jinso gibe sonam ki drola pinchire sangye drupare shu sangye chedan tsogi chonam la chancho pardo dani kyapsu chi dagi jinso gibe sonam Drola pinchira sangye, drupara shua sangye, chedan tsoge chonam la, chancho pardo dani kyapsu chi, dage jinso gibes, drupara shua.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. With the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Haye ke da ludan jinge drubudan da mi kenam da druwa kunge tanam chi tsampa tamche ke do da ge che ten.
Good morning. There's a beautiful book called the Book of Kadam. And in this book, there are different transcriptions of conversations that happened between Atisha, this most important master of the 11th century, and his and various disciples, including his closest disciple Dromtonpa. They're really beautiful, these conversations. At a certain point, Atisha says to Dromtonpa, "Oh, my child, don't be afraid of suffering." And Dromta says, he answers, "But if I am not afraid of suffering, then I won't try to avoid it, and so I'll end up suffering even more." And Atisha answers, "No, because fear of suffering makes us suffer much more." If we see very often, we have different types of suffering. There's physical suffering, there's mental suffering. As we've said many times, in this context in which we find ourselves, our suffering is mostly, is it physical? No, it's mental, right? We have mostly mental suffering, and this mental suffering, does it have to do with the present or the past or the future? It's mostly about the past or the future. It seems strange, but one rarely suffers for the present. You know, it could be. It's mostly for past and future. It's the present suffering is usually about physical suffering, but our mental suffering has to do mostly with our past and future. And what we do actually is we re-suffer for things that happened in the past, and we pre-suffer for our future. This is our common tendency, let's say. And another text, it's a transcription given by Kyabshen Dorje Trijan Chang, this, the master, the root guru of Lama Ganchen. It was quite strong how he explained. How can I say? Not 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 that easy to understand on at some levels, but I read it and I really reflected on it. And in just a few words, he summarizes. It was quite long, but I'll summarize. He says suffering should be treated without fear. One should almost make friends with suffering. Don't also see the benefits that it gives us. This is difficult for us in this context because it gives us a wrong idea. Because in our culture, we, you know, we have this idea that to grow one needs to suffer. No, it's not that you have to suffer, but the point is, if you go against suffering, you're worse off. So let's try to look at this briefly. Obviously, no one of us likes to suffer. I mean, the definition of suffering, to understand what we're talking about, is all the feelings, experiences that we have, the sensations that we have, physical or mental, that that so have an object and through which we experience the suffering. It's always mental in the sense that when someone, so if someone were to give us anesthesia, and so maybe there's pain to the body, but our nervous system can't perceive it. So what actually suffers is the mind that is suffering. But within this, we divide it into mental and physical suffering because it depends on the object that actually the object that creates this suffering. So if it's an object of our five senses, it's physical suffering. Instead, if the object is a mental object, some kind of projection to the future, a memory, an idea, then this we can say is mental suffering. So suffering is all the sensations that we feel, that we experience, that we want them to end as soon as possible and not come back. Instead, pleasurable feelings is when we want them to last as long as possible, and when they do end, we want them to come back as soon as possible. So, but let's start with the basis here that suffering should be avoided. We don't want to suffer. I mean, all the Buddhist teachings are about how to not suffer, how to be happy, how to be well with ourselves and others. And now there's that path to get there, because every once in a while, I don't know if this is right, but sometimes it comes to my mind. And when I was a child, I watched this cartoon. What was the name of it? It was a kind of crazy race, and they needed to see who would win the race with different means, and then no one was ever really to get there easily. They just were hurting themselves to get there. So you know, so it's like everyone does everything they can to be happy, but it's almost as if they're doing the opposite. One. I thought it would be good to write a book, like a manual to suffer better, But sometimes because it seems like we do it on purpose. We say we want to be happy, but it looks like we intentionally do everything to suffer. Fighting, for example, is it good or bad for us? We know it's harmful. We know that's true. Are we sure? Yes. Going into conflict, hurting another person, is it beneficial or harmful? It hurts. It's harmful. And yet we do it. Why? Because we have habits. It's not that we do it on purpose, but even if we want to be happy, we have these conditionings, habits that somehow um, make us act in a certain way, maybe that we don't want to, but we just keep repeating it. Even dissatisfaction, for example, we know that we cannot reach satisfaction by getting things. But when we're in front of our object of attraction, we want it. We know deeply that it's useless to victimize ourselves. I mean, we can change the object in front of us, but as long as we have our inner dynamics, etc., that suffering will stay. And yet, what do? We try to change the situation. We're constantly pointing our finger. This, this, this brings us a very clear idea that understanding doesn't give us much, because at the end of the day, our uh, the part of our mind is not is not that influenced by concepts, and we need to experience things. We need to familiarize ourselves with these experiences again and again. And one of the most important things is to have faith in ourselves. Say, I can do it. A little bit like if we are given a challenge that can be anything. Imagine that it's the first time we need to cook by ourselves, and we have people who are watching us, and it's the first time we do it, so we feel a little uneasy, right? Um, if it ends well, then I feel a little bit more self-esteem, and I say, okay, I can do it. Um, if the first time I do it, it it doesn't work out, I'm afraid, I run away, then I just stay fixated on that negative experience. So these challenges in life are extremely important, because when we're faced with a situation where we're getting out of our comfort zone, where there's a difficulty that we're facing, these situations, um, they act also like mirrors. They show us our ego, our fear, our weakness, our our fragility. They show us different aspects of ourselves: our impatience, our nervousness, our arrogance. But when we're able to overcome that difficulty without without getting overwhelmed or getting involved in certain dynamics, that brings us more faith in ourselves. So this idea that I can do it, and the text that I talked about before says first we need to face small sufferings without having fear of the suffering. In other words, difficulties without fearing difficulties, because the more we're able to face small difficulties without being afraid of them, then we'll see that in that small difficulty we can see that we can grow, we can learn it's, for example, someone who has faced many difficulties, when he's faced with a small one, they don't think about it at all. They say, oh, this is nothing. I remember once in Brazil, I was talking to a boy that I knew, and he he had done military service, this crazy military service. And talking a little bit like this, he said, he, you know, how did it go yesterday? Oh, I finished work, I finished working really late. And but I went out walking under the rain. It's about 20 kilometers he walked. And I said, "What, are you tired?" No, no. What do you? It's nothing. It's nothing for me. One goes walking. That's it. If you could know what I've done. I mean, most of us, most of us get home late from work and we're exhausted. You know, we're exhausted um, and we're tired, we're upset, we're nervous. The last thing we're going to do is to walk. Um, in this case, he was able to face this difficulty. I think it is his because he was used to facing difficulties that were much greater, and so this was nothing. It's not that he was without problems along his path. I remember once my grandparents here in Albagnano. There was my grandfather, my grandfather, my grandmother, and my great aunt, who's even older than my grandmother. And as they were uh, as they were driving up, another car came down, and they were a little bit nervous, and and they weren't able to start the car again. Someone else came to help the car. At a certain point, we went and we resolved the situation. Everybody tense, and instead, my grandparents were absolutely calm, as if I mean they didn't even comment on it. How are you? Everything's fine. There are people that in their lifetime they faced many great difficulties to, escaping war when they were young, um, moving to another country, but they had the strength and the ability to overcome these difficulties. This gives inner strength, faith in oneself. That's very, very important in life. Because otherwise we become extremely fragile. Is this concept clear? So somehow we could even say, when I'm able to overcome difficulties and I develop a more self-esteem and trust in myself, let's remember also that reality is relative. So, what, walking 20 kilometers in the city is nothing compared to what I did in the jungle. And I'm not saying that we should go looking for trouble, but but the situations that are already present in our lives, if we see that difficulties are actually opportunities, if we know if we know how to deal with them, because we can grow, we can develop more trust in ourselves, we can overcome these difficulties. We can look at ourselves in the mirror, practice awareness, effort. There's so many qualities that we can practice when faced with a difficulty. or we can reinforce negative dynamics like fear and anxiety and anger and jealousy, etc. It's not, it's not a difficult situation is not in itself an opportunity. Oh, you need to learn because to learn you need to go through difficulties. That's not true. It's how you deal with the situation, and it's important to start this with small things. But it's important for me to understand that getting outside our comfort zone is is it doesn't come from outside. What brings us outside our comfort zone are not the situations themselves, but myself. I don't know. I don't know if it's happened to you where nothing really has changed, but then at a certain point, you just the mind, goes goes left, and you're outside your comfort zone when nothing has happened. It's the mind plays its games. So the point is, how can I say? Let me just start from another point of view and then we'll get back to this point. I see in these days that we're living what appears to me, and I could be wrong, that we start from a concept, from an idea that I've talked about many times, this kind of law of maximum comfort, minimum effort, where we want to avoid any kind of difficulty and obtain all our objects of desire. But I have this feeling that not, you know, you know, it seems that the younger generations seem to be much more emotionally fragile. I mean, I I don't know if you have the same feeling that looking back in the generations that they are actually stronger. Um, they're able to maintain stability, um, to have fewer mental, brain games, mental games. And it seems like the further along we go with the younger generations, they've had fewer difficulties, but an increase in fragility. And instead, when we have to face small challenges, medium or great challenges, even from childhood, from when we're really small, here we have two possibilities. If it's a challenge that is if it's something that we can overcome, then we develop this better self-esteem and trust in ourselves. And instead, if it's too big for us, there's this danger that we actually are harmed and we are traumatized. But it's important to have these challenges. It's important every once in a while to expand our comfort zone in the sense, let me explain myself better. It's important to expand one's comfort zone. I mean to say, make it so one should would need less to be fine. Because the idea is the the more space we need, the more we want things to be in a certain way. And then more easily we're not well. Our happiness is more fragile. The fewer expectations we have, the fewer needs that we have, then the less fragile we are, the less fragile our happiness is. When learning how to be well outside of our comfort zone, then gradually we can be well in other situations. And this brings an important aspect in the practice of patience. And in patience, when patience is not just about not getting angry. Patience is also our ability to not be involved, to not lose one's balance when faced with difficult situations. So there's patience related to difficult situations, to pain, to the missing object of desire, where the reality that surrounds me is not pleasurable. It's not how I would like it to be, but I'm not going to be taken by that feeling. I'm not going to let that take up all the space of my world. This is a form of patience that our language doesn't always take consideration of. Trishna Rinpoche explained that when we're able to overcome small difficulties, our threshold increases. When we are never faced with difficulties, or if there are difficulties and don't we don't do our own process of overcoming them, but someone does it for us, then our threshold of ability to face difficulties is kept low. Is this clear? So, if really if it is as it appears that most of our suffering are mental sufferings and not physical, then we need to find ways to have less mental suffering. And a way to have less mental suffering is our ability to have faith in ourselves in facing and overcoming challenges. Because I see often that when one is in a difficult situation, for example, maybe a diagnosis of a sickness or an economic problem, conflict with someone else, there could be so many different kinds of problems. The tendency that we have when we try to discuss it with the person, to say don't worry, we say it, but it's the we look at we're looking at the outside reality. It's not always going to be like this. It's not going to be like that. It'll pass. If we have a diagnosis ourselves with fear, and someone says, "No, it'll all be fine," but that doubt remains, doesn't it? And does that help us? No. Instead, what can we do? Instead of saying, no, it will all be fine, instead we should reinforce our ability to face things, saying, it doesn't matter what happens, you have the resources to face them. Physical resources. In the case of a sickness, economic resources, medical resources, familial resources. You have the resources to face the situation. And when we see the problem in front of us and we're able to take refuge in the resources that I already have, saying, I have the resources to face this situation, the fear diminishes. Okay, so it's very important to reinforce our ability, our self-esteem, our ability to overcome, to face problems, to really find a solution and apply it to our daily life. And we learn we develop this by facing small problems, small challenges, one after the other. I remember as a small boy, so many small things that I needed to face and overcome. And I remember that every time it was a little bit more difficult, there was a good feeling. I remember now once I I must have been about 14, not older, and we went to Borobudur, and I traveled by myself. I would travel by myself, and coming back, there's a whole story because my my ticket. I'll just make a long story short. Garuda Airlines, they made a mistake in changing my ticket, and so when I got to Singapore to take my flight, they 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 said no. They wrote down a flight that on the ticket that wasn't your ticket, and I had flown with Air India. Anyway, I was able to go back to the original flight after like 14 hours later. And the problem was that the people who 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 were supposed to come to pick me up, they had already arrived. They had already left the monastery 6 hours in by bus, and there were no cell phones at the time. So I needed to get to another city by myself, take a train, take a bus, I needed to find solutions. And I remember this inner feel, the sensation of a challenge, of tiredness too, but this feeling of joy in in overcoming that difficulty. And there's so many different kinds of difficulties that we can face. But when we're able to overcome a difficulty, we generate this feeling of, ah, oh, good. I'll just give you a really simple example. Years ago, I remember that traveling, Lama traveled tremendously. Even before Albagnano, he traveled even more. And in those years, he would bring people on different pilgrimages. And in this specific case, I remember, um, you know, so just for these people getting outside their comfort zone, eating foods that they weren't used to, sleeping in places that weren't as comfortable, but they were still fine. They were still happy, and so you I saw that these people then, by traveling, by having these experiences, they would complain less and they would be more satisfied. And so they understood that, you know, you know, I was happy being comfortable, but I was happy uncomfortable too. So comfort is not what brings my happiness, but eating in an uncomfortable place, eating food that I don't like, or traveling in uncomfortable means. It seems like unimportant things, but these are actually experiences that help overcome small challenges and generate greater satisfaction. So the more we're able to overcome problems or difficulties, the the more sure we feel, and the less fear we feel for the future. This is very important. And among all the challenges in life, where's what's the most dangerous jungle? The most dangerous, the place where there are the most tiresome challenges, as with human relationships, right? Often, you know, you know, you know, sometimes talking an hour with someone could seem more tiresome than than climbing a mountain or having to face other situations. But it's exactly for this reason that it's extremely important for our emotional stability, for our ability, this this trust in ourselves to to face these relationships and learn how to adapt ourselves to others and be with others. It could seem, I say this, it seems, maybe it seems obvious, but we live in a times where people just retreat onto themselves. Each one retreats into his own small world that he tries to make. Where I have my house, I have my room, I have my movies, and I have what I like around me, you know? And if we look the way people relate, the word um, to say evolve is the wrong word. This is the opposite of evolving. The way it the is so the way that we're the the way that people are relating to each other is going backwards, because if I communicate with someone and don't I don't have the person in front of me, it's easy. Oh, I don't want to talk to you anymore. I just hang up or I click off. Uh, okay, so this situation I don't want to live. I don't want to live this situation. So what's one of the problems of this really is that we're not facing challenges anymore in relationships, in being face to face, looking at each other eye to eye, having to relate to people. This is one of the greatest gyms of our life, is relating with other people, and it's fundamental to be able to be well with ourselves. We need to be able to be well with others. That's the space to grow. It's when they asked Itisha about his cook, who apparently Atisha had a cook who was very difficult personality. He fought with everyone, and one day they went to Atisha after many years in Tibet, and they said, Master, now I don't remember his name. Your cook, maybe we send him to have a vacation in India. Let's remember that we're talking about the 11th century. I mean, you know, a vacation in India meant 3 years, a year to go, a year to stay, a year to come back, and or they said maybe a meditation retreat at 3 years, 12 years, something like this. And Atisha doesn't answer, and then he looks at them, and he says, "I'm sorry, who are you talking about? You're not talking about my master of patience, are you?" Because the the greater the challenges are, the then the more we can overcome them and grow. I mean, it's they're mirrors. These human relationships, they're mirrors that show us our fears, our arrogance, our impatience. It's where we can learn how to overcome these small challenges by dealing with others. It's where we grow the most. So, we shouldn't right away, throw ourselves into the most difficult, most dangerous of jungles, but little by little, you know, it should happen from childhood, from childhood, little by little. We learn how to overcome small difficulties and grow. And this is why when there's someone who is facing a moment of difficulty where he has the resources to overcome them, what what we should not do is resolve the problem for that person, because we're hurting them, be it a child or an adult. I don't know if you agree with this or not. Because if you're if you're having trouble, and every time you're having trouble, I come and I resolve that for you. What kind of message are you receiving? That you're not able to do it yourself. You don't have the resources to face the situation. You know, I do it because I don't want you to suffer. But in the meantime, I'm I'm hurting you. Instead, if I um, accompany you, if I go side by side and I say, okay, you can do it, and and I I help you understand that you have the resources to face the situation, then 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 maybe I'm here as a backup, but and of course without forcing situation and respecting limits, not like in my childhood. I remember once, my this father who wanted to a father wanted to teach his child how to swim, and he just threw him in the pool. Um, and then that child didn't want to go swimming for a long time. He had to overcome that trauma. I wouldn't do that, but personally speaking, but there's so many things that are not black and white, so many different shades. But it's important for us to not be afraid of difficulties, um, to not be afraid of having to deal with someone who thinks differently than we do. Because, instead, we we should be without fear. We have the resources to face any situation. When I look at my past, I see that the difficult situations that I lived, that I was able to face, some I was able to overcome, some I wasn't able to resolve, but always facing them. They were they left, some of them left some scars, but it was always beneficial in the end. So we shouldn't be afraid of the future. We should have faith in our resources. And then anything that happens, regardless of what happens, I have the resources. Where I see that I'm missing resources, I need to generate them. Instead of thinking that we need to secure our future, we should secure our resources. Um, the future is said that to be in is uncertain in its nature. I don't know if it's ever happened to see or live situations that you would have never imagined. And I have. I think all you too. I saw things that, even with the best imagination, I would never have thought that it to be so beautiful things and less beautiful. Um, our future is uncertain. We don't know, what is going to happen, but we can be sure of one thing: the resources that we have, that we cultivate, they will be with us to help us face anything that we meet. So it's important to put energy in our resources, our patience, our stability, our joy, gratitude, satisfaction, concentration, awareness. These are all characteristics that will help us face any situation. And I'll just repeat one more time. Once we're able to overcome and learn and grow, the stronger we will be, Um, and instead, when we don't, then we'll be crying for what was, and living with fear that the situation will come again. With this, there's also, how can I say? I'll try to find a nice way to say this. once I did something wrong at the monastery. T- to tell you the truth, I don't remember exactly what it was. Maybe I blocked it, I don't know. But I said something in a way that, and it wasn't my intention, but I created conflict between one of my masters and one of my professors. And they, between them, they were master and disciple. There was so a kind of conflict came about based on something that I had said. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I remember that when my teacher came to me, he came to me angry with me. And he said, "What did you do? Look at what the situation that you've created." I, when he said to me, a little bit before I had understood, I had realized what I had done. And in that moment, what I tried to do was, I mean, the first thing I tried to do was to welcome him, like, oh, accept him. I said, "You're right. I made a mistake. I did this and that was that I was wrong. I'm sorry. What can I do to help the situation that I've helped create?" And he was, I remember. I remember that he just calmed down and he said, "Well, now there's nothing you can do. It's a situation that I need to manage myself." But instead, it can happen that when we find ourselves, um, when we do something wrong and it's highlighted, um, you know. So, what is our tendency to admit our error and try to look for a solution, or do we victimize ourselves or have this tendency to try to justify ourselves? You know, we put ourselves on the defensive, and you know, it's beautiful. When there's a mistake, you know, which we all do, it's normal. And then we can openly admit it without fear and say, "Yes, I'm sorry. I did something, you know, whether it was involuntary or involuntary. I made this mistake. What can I do?" I mean, like this, we grow, we learn. I This reminds me of the story of 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 the watermelon. Once I came home from a trip. I got back to Albagnano and the toilet was blocked, and luckily there was the the plumber was there. He dismounted the toilet and he found two or three slices of watermelon rind, you know, all like eaten up. And this watermelon rind was in the toilet. And he said, "What did you do?" I mean, uh, who puts watermelon rind in the toilet? Where's your head? And I said, "I just got back from a trip. I don't know anything." And he said, "Oh yeah, the years that I do this job, and no one is ever responsible. It's never anyone's fault. Even when I found the craziest thing, you know, even when I find the craziest things in someone's house who lives alone, they say, 'Oh, who did that?' So, so the only person who was in the house in those days, and I asked that person, 'Did you eat any watermelon? Do you know anything about the watermelon?' 'No,' this person said. But so may the watermelon just self appeared, just materialized, or some spirit, no, someone someone came in through the window and played a joke on me. But beyond this, I mean, many times I've had to face something that didn't go so well and not find the space where one says, "Okay, you know, let's face the situation. Um, you know, let's look for a solution where people, you know, admit their mistake and open themselves up to look for solutions." Because often we have this culture of blame. And so we try to say, it's not my fault. I am a victim too. But, you know, if there's someone, is there an original sinner then? Or are we all victims in one way or another? Take take someone who acts with great violence and you say, why did you do this? You shouldn't have done that. And it is something that the person shouldn't have done. If that person starts victimizing, they say, well, I did this because you don't know what happened to me. And so it's a reaction in based on what that person lived. And then you go to and then you go up to those who did harm to that person, and they say, oh, but you don't know what I had to live through. No one is of just of nothing. Comes from nothing. The key is to break this chain where we see that there's a behavior that is that isn't positive, you know. Well, we don't need to focus on, who's guilty. Nobody's blaming anyone. We shouldn't focus on this. There isn't one guilty one. There's an infinite, complex interdependence. But how can I break this dynamics? How can I go towards a better future and stop repeating the same things? And in this process, there is what's called openly admitting one's mistakes, which is not about feeling guilty. There's no one to blame. It's just about, okay, this doesn't work, better not do it again. Okay, doing like this, acting like this didn't bring good results. This way of speaking, this way of thinking doesn't bring good results. Better to look for a different way, by it, and then accepting, one, with love. There's So we don't need to constantly victimize ourselves, justify ourselves, and put ourselves in the defensive. Instead, we look forward and say, how can I do now? Okay, these things said in this way doesn't bring good results. This phrase that Einstein apparently says is that craziness is repeating the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Instead, no, I saw that this doesn't work like this, and it's better to change my ways. So don't be afraid of admitting your mistakes. And in the same way, if we have this attitude, even difficulties and the problems, they're always an opportunity to learn, to grow. So there's nothing wrong with this. A fundamental point, starting point, is our ability to love ourselves, to treat ourselves with affection, to accept ourselves, because we have both of ourselves and of others an idealized image of how we should be. And when we don't correspond to this idealized image of ourselves, we think there's something that's not going well. But we are the fruit of all the interdependencies and causes and conditions and everything that has happened up till today. And we don't need to blame ourselves to say, oh, I shouldn't be like this. I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have been like that. What's there is what I am now. I need to accept myself, but also redirect myself. So how do I how do I want to be, and then I direct myself towards what I want to be. This is very important. We're not here to cry about the past. We're here to look towards the future, to to what we want to be. And in this process, how can I say? What's what's important too are the experiences that we live, and often it's not that important if the experience is pleasurable or painful, but if at the end of the day this experience is good for us or not. So if in this experience we build something good, we learn, or instead we're just reinforcing bad habits, because there there are pleasurable experiences that are harmful for us, yes. And there are also experiences that are not pleasurable but that are good for us. So it's important to have joyous moments, enjoy life, and it's beautiful. And we need to live life with pleasure and joy. But at the same time, our priority is what we become, what we learn, how we grow in front of a situation. So we don't have to do like the disciples of Atisha. They were called Kadampas, his disciples, for a few centuries, from the 11th to about 12th, 13th century. In that time, there was a very strong way to practice. And some practitioners, they would do this. When I realized that I've realized a certain level of patience, and there couldn't find any situation around me that would make me lose my patience, what would I do? I would look for extreme situations to see if there was some kind of anger hidden inside. We don't need to do this. We're not there yet to have to look for situations, to actually intentionally look for situations to be mirrors for ourselves. But the relationships we have daily with the daily frustrations, or the relationships with other people, it's there. Understand that there's a space where we learn, where we can grow. And our objective is often it's not the thing itself, but is overcoming. Like, for example, there are games for children where what's the most important part of the game? The game itself, what it does, or what one learns through the game. Obviously, what one learns through the game. Games that help relate with others, or have more more concentration, or have more self-esteem or faith in oneself. And the same thing happens as adults, but unfortunately we don't play anymore. It would be really good for us to play more. But even if we don't play very much, we have many activities in life. So at work, or daily familiar relationships, etc. And very often, so what's more important is it's not the activity itself, but what we're learning, what we're transmitting, how we're transforming through that activity. Because there's not that much difference between a child and an adult. And there are differences, but there are many, many similar aspects too. And there's a moment that we get, we get to a certain point and we think that we we don't need to learn or grow. No, now I need to be productive. I need to resolve. But we never stop learning. We never stop growing or learning. So give priority to the experience, not the activity in itself, but how through that activity we learn, we grow. And so our priority, it's not about what happens, but what I learn from what happens, how do I grow, how do I better myself when faced with this situation. And there's another point here just to conclude. Are we selfish or not? Do we think about our own well-being? Do we give priority to the I and the my? Yes. Well, let's try to do it well. Let's do really what is good for us. There's a situation that we don't like. Someone acts in a way that we don't like. When we react badly, when we act badly in that situation, we're giving power to that situation. And instead, if I want to be well, then I, quote unquote, don't care, I don't take that. I don't take that burden of what happened. Oh, he shouldn't have done this. How does he allow himself to say that? I don't need to take all of that on. If I want to be well, I'm not going to to rip my brain apart about what's going to happen tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. I direct myself towards the future. I take care of my future, but without inventing too many problems. I reinforce my resources to face problems, to go in the right direction. But let's let's do what's good for us. So the conclusion is, as Atisha said, don't be afraid of suffering because for fear of suffering, we suffer even more. Instead, let's remember that situations that take us out of our comfort zone are challenges that should be lived as like game. Where can I, what can I learn? How can I grow? It's a great opportunity to better ourselves and to grow. Having less having less fear of suffering, things lighten up. It's not easy and immediate, but it's something that, but we can direct ourselves in this direction, and little by little we'll get there. Remember that when we have small difficulties, I'll just give you a simple example. We're in the car and there's traffic. Can happen, right? A little bit less here in Albagnano, but generally, if you live in the city, it happens often and it can generate some stress. No, take it as a challenge. No, I'm going to be fine in this traffic. Why does it generate stress for me? Because I'm attached to an idealized image that I was supposed to arrive at a certain time, and I need to stay. Here, standing still here. No, take a deep breath, recite some mantras, talk to someone. Try to face that without being stressed. It's a small challenge, and there are thousands of different things that we can do similar to that. So I thank you. It's time for our dedications. Let's each try the best way possible to put it into practice.
Drove Michel tato ne gyuru chi kewa kunto yanda Lama dang drame cheki pela long che ching sadan lamge yenten rabzo ne dorje change kopa nyur tobe sho nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan delek shin Nintzen takto delek pe kuncho sumke chinge lop Concho sumke ngodrubu tsol, concho sumke trashisho.
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
At dawn or dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
I just want to remind you that now a puja ceremony is about to start, a healing ceremony, healing puja. Mamo Tukung in Tibetan. It's a practice it's a healing practice that Lama Ganchen used to do often. It's quite complex and it's done seldom in and very seldom in the monasteries, and Lama Ganchen would do it daily. I lived with him, and it's it's an important healing practice, you know, for both mental and physical suffering. It'll last all day, and you can stay as long as you want, a little bit all day long. Thank you very much.